questions at the end. I don't claim to be a medical expert, but you can ask medical questions, you can ask personal questions. I'm an open book, and you can ask anything you want. I even asked David if he'd be willing to answer a question if one came up, and he nodded his approval, I believe. So, you know, I didn't see that nod. I kind of took it for granted. But we'll assume that he will be willing. Before I get into telling you about the miracle of a heart transplant, and it truly is a miracle, I want to talk with you about that word, heart. I noticed after I had the transplant that word kept popping up. I mean, it almost would go zinging when I'd hear it, because I would be so sensitized to that word. Have you ever had anything like that where maybe you've learned a new vocabulary word and suddenly on every radio and TV program they're using that word? Well, for me it was heart. And the first Sunday after my transplant, in fact 8 days after the heart transplant, I was singing in the choir on Sunday morning and was just amazed at how many times in our music and in our conversation, our prayers, our litany, we used the word heart. And we used it to mean many different things. And I began thinking about what heart really means and how the meanings that we have come to us. And one of the things I'd like to do is have you share with me this morning. I'd like this to be quite informal. And if you can think of any phrases that we use just first in our common vernacular, as we're talking with each other, as we're on the phone, whatever it might be, how do we use the word heart? What expression can you think of that you might have used?
Heart of my heart.
Heart of my heart. And what does that mean?
Sharing.
Okay, all right. Anybody else?
The heart of the matter.
The heart of the matter. What does that mean?
It means like get down deep into what means the most.
Okay, get down deep to what means the most. Anybody else?
Have a heart.
Have a heart. What does that mean?
Show compassion.
Okay, show compassion. All right. Anyone else?
Heartfelt feelings.
Heartfelt feelings. And any comment on what that might be?
Just deep meaning.
Deep meaning to the feelings. Okay. And often I hear people say, from the bottom of my heart. And I'm not sure exactly what that means other than, like Jean's, deep feelings, the depth of the feeling. Anyone else? Heart and soul, okay. And that's interesting because we think of the heart as the seat of the soul. So heart and soul. Any additional comment? Okay. Let's move on to music. That's what I had noticed first, that when we sang the hymns or when we did the choir anthem, I got all teary those first few weeks. I've been very sentimental since my heart transplant. And I tear up easily. And part of that is just the enormity of what happened. But part of that is I have a real sentimentality and a real appreciation for all of you and for all of the people in various parts of my life. But how about from music, either secular or sacred? Think of anything?
We shall overcome. The word is deep in my heart. I would still believe we shall overcome.
Okay, deep in my heart. And we've kind of said what that means. Thank you.
Create in me a clean heart, O God.
Create in me a clean heart, oh God. What's a clean heart? Pure, okay. Maybe without distractions. Okay. What's the spiritual? Into my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian. Into my heart. Which, I'm not sure what that means either. In my heart. When we think of the heart as the seat of the soul, that fits, I guess. Any other music?
Well, that's just like Come Into My Heart, that gathering song.
Okay, come into my heart. Inviting the presence of God or Christ in our hearts.
Bonnie Raitt has a song called Hearts Don't Mind.
What is it?
Hearts don't mind.
Hearts don't mind. And what does that mean?
I think meaning that the heart doesn't do what the brain tells it to sometimes.
Mind in the way of doing what you're told. Okay. How about another secular song? Anybody think of one?
I left my heart in San Francisco.
I left my heart in San Francisco, and what was the one over here?
Achy breaky heart.
Achy breaky heart. So we do hear it a lot. And then another category that I wanted to use was literature, whether it be Shakespeare or any other kind of book that you've read. It could be a phrase from that book. It could be a movie title that came from literature. Think of anything with heart in it?
The heart is a lonely object.
The heart is a lonely object. Now, I'm not gonna ask you for a book review or a movie review, but any idea what that refers to?
No, I don't know.
Not a clue. Okay, anybody know? I don't know either. I've never seen the movie, but I don't remember it very well. Anything else from literature that you can think of?
Telltale heart.
The telltale heart. And I'm sure you must have a thought about what does that mean?
I know the story about it a little bit, I don't.
Okay, the telltale heart, I think, was when someone felt really guilty about having killed someone, they could imagine that the heartbeat was so loud that everyone could hear it. It wasn't real, but that's what they meant.
By Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, yes, very good. Any other literature references? Otherwise, I do have plant in the audience. Heart of darkness. And do you know what that means?
Subconscious.
Okay, journey to the subconscious. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to call on my friend Tracy Thomas Wilson, and I asked her ahead of time if she would mind looking up some literary references. I know she has some Shakespeare and some other things, so what do you got for us, Trace?
Well, my favorite was from Pascal, and he said, "The heart has reasons, reason knows nothing of." I've always liked that.
Say that one again, it's good.
The heart has reasons, reason knows nothing of. And I like that. And also, Maya Angelou said, "If you find it in your heart to care for somebody else, you will have succeeded." I like that. Then I looked up a bunch of Shakespeare. These are some from Hamlet. "'Tis bitter cold and I am sick at heart. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? But break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. You pluck out the heart of my mystery." And then a bunch of other ones that just occurred in several of the Shakespeare texts. Hard-hearted, true-hearted, honest-hearted, marble-hearted, dog-hearted, heart-struck, heart-sick, heart-ache. And wearing your heart on your sleeve, that's from Othello. So I thought that was interesting.
And Trace, what do you think wearing your heart on your sleeve means?
Well, Tiago says it's for dogs to peck at, which are birds. So I think what it means is if you expose your heart, it's really get injured.
Okay, yeah. Did everybody hear that? If you expose your heart, it may get injured. Okay. Any more fun?
Oh, I've got pages.
Okay, maybe we'll go on. Thank you, unless you have a favorite you want to share.
Well, I shared my favorite.
Okay, okay. I think that the Shakespeare ones were interesting in that so many of them have found their way into our common everyday usage. The heart sick and stone-hearted and so on. You know, we use those things in our common vocabulary. The last one I have is references from the Bible, and I asked David if he would come up with a few. But in the meantime, before he does anyone want to beat him to the punch? Where do we hear heart in the Bible? I should have warned you, shouldn't I? Think of any?
Blessed are the pure in heart.
Hey, all right. I think I've heard that one recently. Very good. Anybody else? David, why don't you tell us what you found?
Well, there are many, of course, and some that come to mind and reference are, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. That's in there. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on thine own understandings, from Proverbs. And a new heart I will give you. Blessed are the pure in heart. And where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. Believe in your heart that God has raised Christ from the dead. And many more, of course.
Okay. Thank you. Well, you can see we have many meanings for the word heart, and that certainly has occurred to me over the last 2.5 months. And another thing that has happened to me in the last 2.5 months is that several people have said to me, now that you have a new heart, have you had any cravings for foods that you didn't like before? Or have you noticed an intense interest in murder mysteries when you didn't read them before? Or something like that? Well, the answer is emphatically no. The things that we refer to the brain. The brain is the seat of all thought, of all emotion, of all feeling, whether it be emotional or physical. And so when we use all these expressions, we're really talking about our brains. And what the heart is in physical terms, and that's fine. We can talk about heart in other romantic terms and whatever way we choose to use it. And I'm not here to say, let's have pure language and the heart only refers to this little piece of tissue in our chest. I don't mean that at all. But frankly, when you have a heart transplant, you think of that heart as a pump. I was told a year and a half ago that I was in serious enough heart failure. I've been in chronic heart failure for years, but that it had gotten to the point where I probably had a year or two to live if I didn't get a heart transplant. And the reason that my heart needed to be replaced was that it could no longer pump efficiently. And my heart was pumping at a rate probably 1/5 of what a normal heart pumps at. And so my blood was not getting to all parts of my body. I was tired a lot. I huffed and puffed. It affected my lungs. I would climb half a flight of stairs and have to stop and catch my breath. So there were lots of things that I could notice, but they came on slowly, so maybe I wasn't quite as ready as I thought I might be to hear, you need a heart transplant. Now, it's not quite that simple as you say, okay, then bring it on. No, it doesn't work that way. I signed up with the University of Minnesota's program to be tested and to go through all kinds of emotional counseling as far as was I a good candidate to receive a heart emotionally. And was I a person who had a strong enough memory to be able to do the caring for myself after a transplant, including taking tons and tons of pills of many different kinds in many different doses and being sure that I got them all at the right time. So there were lots of things that they needed to know. One, you had to qualify by having your heart be bad enough that they knew you wouldn't live very long. But the rest of your body had to be healthy enough that if they did give you a heart, you could maintain it. Because they need to be good stewards of the hearts that become available. There aren't enough hearts to go around. And so they need very carefully to screen people so that they don't give a heart to someone who in the next month is revealed to have a serious cancer and will not live long. They want people to be able to use these hearts. Now, having diabetes and being blind and having other complications of diabetes, I was told I was not a likely candidate. I met the head of the program and I wore one of my brightest outfits. I put extra blush on. I wanted to look lively. I wanted to look like a person who otherwise, besides this lousy heart, was a person who was going to continue and have a vigorous life. And I also, it was a very strange experience, really had to go to bat for myself, had to sort of convince them that I was worthy in terms of that I would lead a good, healthy lifestyle and that I was a productive person. Now, if you ask someone on the team, and there were 8 members who got to vote on whether or not I got accepted on the heart transplant list, if you ask them, they would say that personality, perkiness, all the things that I was trying to show do not matter. But you know what? They do. Because on paper, I did not qualify. And they kept asking me to meet more and more of the doctors because they knew if they just looked at the papers, I'd be written off immediately as someone who wasn't healthy enough. But when they met me, and I was wearing my pink Puma tennies and my orange jeans and, you know, trying to show off a little bit, and being talkative and being, you know, hi-ho, and that my life is wonderful and I have all these people that depend on me and, you know, so on. You know, I'm exaggerating just a bit, but David will tell you that I really did go to bat for myself. And the head of the program was convinced. Next I saw the surgeon. And the surgeon was very concerned about my being blind. And he said, I just don't think that's going to work. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, when you go home after the surgery, we'll have to send you to a nursing home instead of home. And I said, and why is that? And he said, well, because we don't want you to fall and break open the sutures up and down your chest. Now, at that time, I hadn't had a complication that I have right now with my legs, and I was walking much better. We'll get to that later. But at any rate, I said, well, do you fall? And I'm a little impudent, and he said, well, no, but I can see. And I said, well, in my house, I can see, because I remember what the house is like. I know where all the furniture is. I arranged it. When we get something new, I decide where it goes. And I have a small enough house with enough furniture that I could pretty much walk around the house touching things to give me a little security, knowing, okay, that's the archway between the living room and dining room, and yep, there's the edge of my hutch, so I'm just about to the kitchen door, and so on. So I explained all that to him and gave him kind of 101 blindness. And when he was done, he said, okay, you've convinced me. And so I met several other doctors, and I think they just kind of fell down like little bowling pins. It worked really well for me. After I saw the head of the program again, I said, well, what did Dr. Joyce, the surgeon, have to say? And he said, well, he said, you really taught him a lot, and he's a better man for it. So I hope maybe it helps the next blind person that is looking to be on the list. Well, needless to say, after their meeting, I was voted in and got on the list, and that was about exactly a year ago. However, then I developed some problems with my right leg, and the bones began to disintegrate and literally couldn't hold me up anymore, and eventually I developed an infection and had to have an amputation. So I got taken off the list and put on hold while I had that surgery in July and had a below-the-knee leg amputation, and waited for that to heal up and got my prosthesis and began learning to walk with it. And eventually, when it was time to begin thinking about, can I get back on the list now? Finally, I'm all healed up. I thought I'd kind of done my time. And there was a new head of the program. The guy that was in my corner had moved to Washington, D.C. to establish a new program at a hospital there. And I met the new head of the program, who sat down and was quite blunt and said, now, if it were up to me, you wouldn't be on the list. And he said, I never would have put you on the list in the first place because you have so many, what was it, factors for morbidity, which sounded horrible. Okay, well, all right. But I talked to him about that I really wanted to go forward and that I do well in surgeries. I come through them, with flying colors and recover really fast. And he said, well, tell you what, I'm going to let the team that chose originally to put you on the list vote without my input. And I thought, sure, right. But he apparently did, because I got back on the list. And I got back on the list the Friday before Thanksgiving. And at Thanksgiving, we gathered at my brother's in St. Cloud, and all my siblings were there, and their spouses and kids and so on. It was one of the most wonderful Thanksgivings I have ever had. And I told them, I just had a feeling that I would get a heart before the year was out. And my nephew now teases me because I got one before the week was out. Before the weekend was out. That Friday night, after Thursday Thanksgiving, David and I went to bed, and we were sound asleep, and the phone rang. What time was that, David?
2:14.
2:14. I think he has it emblazoned on his forehead. And the nurse coordinator that was my nurse coordinator happened to be on call, and she said, we think we have a heart for you. You may start getting ready, but I will call you back and let you know more definitely in about 20 minutes. So I said, well, do I have time to take a shower? So I jumped in the shower and wanted to clean hair, of course, to go to the hospital for a heart transplant. So wash my hair and so on. I wasn't dumb enough to put on makeup. I knew they didn't want that. So I got the phone call. I believe maybe David got the second phone call while I was in the shower, and they said, yes, indeed, come on. So we got there about 3:30 in the morning on, let's see, that makes it Saturday. And a lot of waiting, lots and lots of waiting. And apparently there were things to be tied up on the donor side. And we found out that there was a woman waiting also in the next, what do they call them, prep rooms or whatever, waiting for lungs from this same donor. And we finally got the go-ahead. I think it was about 10 in the morning, David, did it start?
We
And
actually went in for the surgery at about 10:14, so it didn't.
at about 10:14, okay. And just before they rolled me into the surgery room, I remember saying to David, would you put a nitro on my tongue? And for those of you who don't know, nitroglycerin is the friend of people with heart disease who, when they get angina, need to pop that nitro under their tongues, and it relieves the angina and possibly prevents a heart attack. So we were that close in, and I was feeling like a heart attack might be on its way. and thinking that that may be the last nitro that David ever gives me. And the surgery, I don't remember a thing about, of course. Luckily, I was out, totally out. And the first thing I remember was being in some pain in my shoulder. I have a rotator cuff injury and some arthritis in my shoulder. The splitting my chest open didn't hurt, but the shoulder did. And at that time, when you're just coming into the recovery room and when you're first in intensive care, the hospital has what they call sitters, who are not professionals. They've had a little training course that they take just to be there in case you need comfort, someone to hold your hand, in case you need the swab with water on your tongue. You can't drink yet, but they put like a huge Q-tip with water on it on your tongue. So those sitters sit there, and mine was named Lyle. And I remember saying, Lyle? And it seemed like he was a canyon away from me. I'm sure he was 2 feet, but it seemed like he was far, far away because I was in this groggy state. Lyle? And finally he comes over and says, yes, yes. And I said, I hurt. And he said, yeah, you've been given pain medication, you'll be okay. And I said, rub my shoulder. So Lyle would rub my shoulder a little bit. And then a few minutes later, Lyle? Lyle? I still hurt. And I'm told that I told poor Lyle and maybe others that my shoulders both hurt. They hurt so much, I'm in pain. Could you cut them off? It had worked for my leg. Totally took away the pain when they cut off my leg. But they decided, thankfully, not to cut off my shoulder. And I understand that for a time I was pretty much in la-la land and said funny things. Now I know David was there, and he had the gracious company of T. Michael for many hours, cousin Evie Sands for many hours, and our goddaughter Laura Carlson was there much of the time. And several of them kept David in sandwiches and cookies and things like that. The surgery lasted 7 hours, so it was a long wait. And then you get to, I think, say hello and see that your person is still alive. And then after that, you sit and wait for them to be a little less groggy and coming out of recovery. Well, as I said, I was still in la-la land for a while and ended up in intensive care with a sitter for a couple of days. And then suddenly I began to get my brain back. I think David was a little nervous because the surgeon, or not the surgeon, the head of the program that didn't want me to be part of the transplant program had said, when I said I was ready to die if that's what happened, because I was going to die before very long anyway, probably. I mean, I was going to work not to, but the statistics said that I didn't have long to live. And so he said, well, it's not just dying that might happen. We could send you out of here, and I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like a drooling idiot. And I was afraid, I think that David was afraid that he got a drooling idiot because I was such a weird person for a while under the effects of the anesthesia and the painkillers. But I did eventually become myself, and once that happened, things went very, very fast. I remember someone coming and wondering if I could swallow, and I said, well, bring it on. So they brought on some juice, and I drank all that, and then they said, would you like to try some pudding? Oh, I love pudding, so I gobbled that up, and I said, do you have any crackers? Well, sure. So I ate crackers and had some more to drink, and they said, well, would you like some lunch? And I said, yes, please. And then listed a few things. It wasn't really lunch time, but it was my lunch. I was starving because I hadn't eaten for days. And I said, how about a grilled cheese sandwich? So they brought me a grilled cheese sandwich. And I love grilled cheese sandwiches. And my experience with them has been at Hennepin County Medical Center, where they make a mean grilled cheese sandwich. Really, really good. Well, at the university, it's not their top. It was just not that great. Now, they have other foods. Their meatloaf, I vouch for. Meatloaf is good. So they have a lot of good things, but the first thing was kind of disappointing. So after that, I got to choose from the menu, and I ate like a horse. I mean, I just gobbled everything down. And then I had friends bring me cookies. I ate those, and a lot of people, you know, kind of snuck in a few little interesting things. So that was great. And after 6 days of being in the hospital, I got to go home, and 2 days later, I was here with you. And that was just a miracle to me. The whole affair was a miracle. And one of the things that was the most miraculous to me was the 3 G's in my head. And that is the grief of the family that chose to give the organs of their loved one that died. The other was my gratitude for that gift that I just cannot express how generous it was. So generosity and grief and gratitude just kept running through my head, generosity and grief and gratitude. And I found out more than you're really supposed to know about the donor. One of my doctors told me it was a very, very young heart, and then I think proceeded to say 17. And with David's reading obituaries, and I'm sure many of you did about that time, we are 99% sure we know who it was, and it was a young woman who died in a single car accident. And every morning and every night before I went to sleep in the hospital, and most of the time since then, I think about that family, and I think about that young woman. And I have to remind myself that my need did not cause their loss. Otherwise, the grief is too much for me. And I have to remind myself that perhaps the family gets some bit of comfort knowing that 6 of their daughter's organs went to keep other people alive, and that in some way she continues to live on this earth. T. Michael was talking this morning about how connected we all are, and I really believe that. I believe I'm connected to the young woman whose heart is beating in my chest. I believe it. Excuse me. I believe I'm connected to her family. I've written them a letter. There's a program called LifeSource, and through LifeSource, you can write to the donor family anonymously. I don't know if they've received my letter yet, because it's up to the family to say whether or not they're ready to get a letter. And then if they read it and choose to respond, that's their decision. They do not have to respond to my letter in any way or acknowledge it in any way. I haven't yet received any acknowledgement. I sent the letter before Christmas, but I don't remember when. I'd written about 15 letters in my head, but none of them were good enough. I finally set down one on tape, and David took it down on the computer for me and then typed it up. And all I could do really was express my gratitude, my concern for their loss, and mention the grief and the gratitude, and talk about how immense I'm sure their grief was, and how immense my gratitude was, and that we would probably never be able to feel what the other one was feeling. But I wanted to thank them for their generosity. I wanted to thank them for their generous spirit in keeping faith with what their daughter had decided. She had decided she wanted to be a donor, and that decision I am glad to know about. And I know about it because of not only did we read her obituary, we read things that people send into the Tribune. And I don't know how many of you are aware that there are sites that they will hold for, I believe, a year after someone dies, and you can send in a message to the family, or if you choose, a tribute to the one who died. And we read, I believe by now, about 25 pages or more of glowing tributes to a young woman